The surveillance camera worked for only 12 seconds, but it was during this time that my father saw what the doctors forbade him even hope. He turned on the recording almost by accident. Not out of suspicion, but rather out of fatigue. The house seemed too quiet, and this silence was more oppressive than any noise. Once upon a time, 3 babies cried here at the same time, doors slammed, toys clinked. Now there is only the steady hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creaking of the floor. A surveillance camera in the living room appeared after the accident. Then the doctors spoke dryly, without pauses, as if they were reading instructions. Spinal injuries, irreversible changes, minimal chances. He remembered nodding, not understanding the words, and how he held by the hand of his wife, while she looked at one point, as if she was already saying goodbye to the future. Since then, the camera has become part of the house. Not because he didn't trust the nanny. On the contrary, it seemed to be the only stable element in his life. Calm, neat, without unnecessary questions. She didn't feel sorry, didn't say poor children, she just was. Side by side. He pressed the start and leaned back in his chair, preparing to rewind the tape to make sure everything was in order, and turn off. But already in the first second, his body tensed. The carriages, they stood against the wall, empty. My heart skipped a beat. He leaned forward, clutching the armrests with his fingers. The camera showed the entire living room. Sunlight from large windows. Polished wooden floor, photos on the wall, happy even before the accident. And his 3 children, his sons, did not. They were sitting, not lying down. They stood unevenly, with their legs wide apart, as if the floor beneath them was shaky as water. One of them swayed slightly, the other held his hands in front of him, trying to keep his balance. The third looked down at his own feet, as if he saw them for the first time. Father inhaled sharply, but the air was stuck in his chest. No, burst out. Almost silently. He thought it was a camera error. Failure, distortion of perspective. He pressed, paused, increased. Image. My heart was pounding so loudly that it seemed to be heard in the recording. It was them. The same faces, the same clothes, the same short blonde hair. No belts, no supports. Only the nurse is a few steps away on her knees with her palms outstretched, but not touching them. In the next second, one of the boys made a movement. Uncertain, almost funny, as if he had forgotten what to do next. His knees buckled. He began to fall, but did not fall. He straightened up and took a step. His father jumped up from his chair, tipping him back. "This can't be," he shouted into the void. She pinched her eyes. He blinked, fearing that the tears would distort the images, but the picture remained clear. Second. The boy laughed. A high, clean baby smith that he had almost forgotten. The third gently pulled his hand towards his brother, and their fingers touched. This moment lasted only a second, but for him. 4 ages. He rewound, then again, and again and again, each time hoping to see a trick. Hidden supports, installation, someone's deception. But I didn't find anything. The camera captured the reality from which my legs gave way. The words of the doctors surfaced in my head: do not build false expectations. Rehabilitation. Centers, simulators, exercises, my wife's tears in the car after another without progress. Sleepless nights surfaced when he sat by the beds and wondered why his family had received such an ordeal. And all this was collapsing now, in these few seconds of recording. He sat back down, feeling his knees tremble. On the screen, the nurse was saying something. The camera did not record sound, but it was visible from her lips. She counted slowly, rhythmically. The children reacted to this rhythm. Their movements were awkward, but lively, real. At some point, one of the boys still fell right to the floor. His father's heart sank, but the nurse did not rush to him. She just leaned closer and said something quietly. The boy rested his palms on the floor and began to rise on his own. Father closed. Face with hands. Something heavy, hot, uncontrollable rose in my chest. It was more than joy, more than shock. It was a feeling that the world he had accepted as final had turned out to be a lie. The recording is over. The screen darkened, reflecting his own face, aged with deep shadows under his eyes. He looked at himself and did not recognized. A man who has humbled himself, who has given up hope. He pressed the start abruptly. Once again. Show me more. He whispered, as if the camera could hear him. And when the recording went in a circle, he realized that after that day their life was already will never be the same. He watched the next tape of the tightening, too worked up to sit up again. Finger trembled over the mouse, as if from one wrong movement everything would disappear, crumble like a dream. Timestamp was fresh this morning. It means that this happened regularly. Not once. Not an accident. The camera showed again. Living room. Everything looked familiar, light, floor, photos. But now he saw the details differently. I noticed how the nanny in advance. I pushed the table aside, freeing up space. How the strollers stood strictly in a row, the brakes were removed, how the children were in the same soft socks, not for beauty, but so that they do not slip. She entered the frame calmly, without fuss, not as a person who does something forbidden, but as someone who knows what he is doing. She knelt before the children, being on the same level with them, and smiled. The smile was not wide, unenthusiastic, concentrated. Working. She began to speak. The camera wasn't recording sound, but he could almost hear her voice. Not because I guessed from my lips, because that I had heard her talk to them too many times on normal days. Evenly, slowly, without pity. One of the boys tensed up immediately. His shoulders rose, his fingers clenched into fists. I have always been the most impatient, the most angry with my own body. Father recognized this expression, a mixture of fear and stubbornness. Careful, he whispered unconsciously, as if he could influence what was happening. The boy swayed, his knees buckled. He took a crooked, heavy step and fell. The blow was not strong, but sharp. Father's heart. It broke off, his hands clenched into fists. But the nurse did not rush to him. She didn't even touch him. She leaned closer, looked into his face, and said something. Slowly, clearly. And the boy, instead of bursting into tears, inhaled. Then he rested his palms on the floor again. No, his father sighed. He can't. It can. The boy got up for a long, very long time. At first, my hands trembled, then my shoulders, then my back. He fell back to his knees, froze, tried again. Camera. I recorded every failure without condescension and every attempt. At some point, the second boy reached out. To him. Awkwardly, with an effort, as if this movement had cost him a separate victory. Their fingers met again, and that was enough. The first one got up. Father felt a wave of rage rising inside him. Not to the children, but to her. Zvezdaka. Why did he not do anything? Did you know? Zvezdaka. Zvezdaka. How many times it happened behind his back? Zvezdaka. Zvezdaka. How many falls, how many steps, how many tears he missed. Zvezdaka. The recording is over. And almost immediately the next one began. Day after day is almost the same. Same room, same movements, but there was progress. Visible. Steps became more confident, fewer falls, faces calmer. He did not notice how time passed. Reality. Returned abruptly with a click from the lock of the front door. He raised his head. The nurse was standing in the hallway, taking off her jacket. Seeing him, she froze. That was enough for a second. Did you see it? She said. I didn't ask. He turned off the monitor. Yes. There was silence between them. Not heavy, tense, as before a blow. "Why?" he asked at last. His voice broke. "Why didn't you tell me?" She went into the living room and sank into a chair. "I'm tired." As if this conversation was inevitable, and she had been preparing for it for a long time. "Because you would have stopped me," she replied. He just opened his mouth to object, but he couldn't find the words. "The doctors told you that it was impossible," she continued. "You." They believed, this is normal. Most parents believe. They protect themselves from pain. I protected my children, almost. He shouted. "No," she looked straight at him. "You protected yourself from hope." These words struck, or rather, any accusation. "You had no right," he said more quietly. "This is dangerous. They could have been injured." "They were injured," she replied calmly. "Both in strollers and in beds. A body without movement collapses faster than a body that falls and gets up." He ran his hand over his face. "Who are you?" he asked. "A rehabilitator?" "Doctor, do you even know what you're doing?" "I am a mother." He waited for the continuation. "My son was born with the same diagnosis," she said after a pause. "The same level of damage, the same words of doctors. I've heard them before you did." He was silent. "I did everything right," she continued. "Instructions, protocols. He didn't go. And then I stopped asking permission." "She is." She looked up. There was no challenge in them, only fatigue. He took his first step a week before he was gone. The room seemed to shrink. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She nodded. "I don't fly. I don't promise. I just give the body a chance to remember what it can do. Sometimes this is enough, sometimes not." He looked in the direction where he was sleeping behind the wall. "Sons. Why are you still here?" he asked. "Because your children didn't give up," she replied. "And because I knew sooner or later the camera would show you the truth anyway." He closed his eyes. At that moment, he realized that the fear wasn't what she was doing, but that if he stopped her now, he would be the one to tell his children. Impossible. He woke up before dawn. The house was unusually noisy, not loud, but lively. Creaking floorboards. Muffled laughter, quiet voices. These sounds did not frighten as before, but pulled them along, as if they promised something important. He left the bedroom and froze in the hallway. 3 boys were sitting on the floor in the living room. Neither in strollers, nor in special chairs, just on the carpet. There were scattered cubes in front of them, and a nanny next to them. She did not lead, did not command, did not correct them every. Wait a second. She was just there, carefully watching how they themselves were looking for balance, how they were learning to distribute weight. How slowly, with effort, but on their own, they reached for toys. One of the sons tried to get up. My knees were shaking, my hands were clutching the edge of the sofa. He froze, as if frightened by his own intention, then looked at the nurse. She nodded faintly, and he stood up. Father felt a lump rise in his throat. The boy stood for only a couple of seconds and sat up again, exhaling heavily. But he laughed not from pain, but from pride. And this laughter turned out to be stronger than any medical report. Dad suddenly heard from behind. He turned. Wife. She was standing in the doorway, pale, with disheveled hair, in a sweater thrown on a sweater. She stared at the stage in front of her as if she was afraid to blink. "Do you see it too?" she asked in a whisper. He nodded. Words were unnecessary. An hour later they were sitting at the table. Coffee has long been left. The children were tired again and rested, lying on pillows. The nurse stood by the window, as if ready to leave at any moment if asked. "We need to understand what is happening," he said. Finally. The voice sounded hollow. "Doctors should know. It's not safe. You know if something happens to them." She is. Turned to him. There was no protection or challenge in her gaze, only calm fatigue. I understand more than you do. You think, she answered, and that is why she did everything slowly, without jerks, without violence to the body. The wife looked at the. She is wary. Why didn't you tell us sooner? The nurse lowered her eyes. Because you would forbid it. Not out of cruelty. Out of fear. Almost all parents do this when they hear the word impossible. He wanted to object and could not. She was right. Who are you really? He asked more quietly. She was silent for a long time, then sat down on a chair, as if her legs had stopped holding her. I am not a doctor, she said, but a miracle worker. I'm just a person who knows all too well what it means not to accept the sentence. She told me about her son, about the diagnosis, about the endless offices where she was persuaded not to torture. About how she once just decided to try not in spite of the doctors, but in spite of hopelessness, about the first movements, about the first attempt to get up and how everything ended with a sudden infection, when Nadezhda had just begun to take shape. There was silence in the room, in which the breathing of children could be heard. I didn't save him, she finished, but I saw how he went, and I know that it was real. Since then, I have not been able to look at the children and agree that theirs. The body is a sentence. My wife wiped away her tears. He looked at the table, afraid to look up. We can't hide it, he said. Finally. If they find out about it, they will find out, the nurse replied calmly. The cameras have already found out. He froze. What do you mean? The camera doesn't just record for you, she said. Cloud storage. Automatic synchronization. If someone got access, he jumped up, rushed to the laptop. Notifications poured in one after another. Missed calls, messages, links. The video was already online. The recording lasted less than a minute, but it was enough. Headings. Shouted. The comments were arguing. Someone called it a miracle, someone called it a dangerous experiment, someone called it a fake. Doctors demanded an explanation. Journalists besieged the house by evening. He stood at the window and watched as the gate drove up. Cars with TV channel logos. The world, which had not noticed their pain for so long, now demanded answers. We will have to fire you, he said to the nanny without turning around. She nodded as if she had expected it. I understand, but not today, he added. And not so. He turned. For the first time ever, she smiled, barely noticeable. In the evening, the children tried to get up again. Not so uncertain anymore. Faster. He sat next to him, his hands ready, but did not interfere. Their every step echoed in him with something painful. Light. He no longer knew how this story would end. I didn't know what the doctors would say tomorrow. I didn't know how many. There will be more falls ahead. But he knew one thing for sure. He will never again allow the word to be impossible to decide for his children. And when the youngest wanderer, swaying, took a step towards him, he realized that everything that had happened before was just waiting for this moment.